Hello readers, and welcome back to Shelf Help with Upon Reread. We return to the world of From Blood and Ash with the final part of A Light in the Flame. When we last left Syrah and Nectus, they were traveling into the Vale to learn the location of Delphi. He's hiding in the mortal world, specifically with Kaylee Bellafor, Tavius's fiancée and the ancestor of one Leopold Bellafor, Poppy's first guardian, and the man she thought was her father. Syrah and Nectus quickly agreed that Delphi is, in fact, not with Kaylee by coincidence, no matter which way you slice it. So, points to the fates for definitely not intervening. Speaking of the Ari, mortals were created in the image of the primals, but they were also given more. The ability to feel emotions? And free will, he said. Fate doesn't usurp that, no matter how much the Ari probably wish they did in some situations. Fate just sees all the possible outcomes of free will. Castile and Kieran are very clearly chosen for Poppy to bring back the balance Ethos and Kalas screwed up. Between the two of them, they have 3 possible love interests die. Shia tried to trade Castile to the Ascended, and he murdered her. Kieran had a girlfriend get a rare wasting sickness, and the Wolven he hooked up with at the wedding died in battle. The Ari may not be able to stop free will, but get in the way of their plans and they will just do a murder. At this point, we get a lot of story beats that, while important, aren't the foreshadowing we're here to talk about. So we will jump to Dalos. Eos helps Syrah get ready for the trip and give us a taste of who Kalas is and how he treats his favorites. Which is terrifying and enlightening. We get our second dead baby count, a count I only do because I refuse to believe Syrah, who has been horrified every time a baby is hurt or killed, will sit back and do nothing as her first grandchild is murdered. I am fully convinced Malik and Isabeth's son is alive. It's no great insight to say that Kalas's favorites are Satoria stand-ins, each one having some feature or quirk that reminds of the girl on the cliff. Placed in a literal gilded cage, given everything but freedom, so long as they can keep sweet. Or at least as long as they can play the part, knowingly or otherwise. But Satoria never wanted to be his prize. Not when he was death, and not when he threw down his brother to become life and king. No amount of money or gifts impressed her. Because Kalas was never in love with Satoria, the person. He was in love with Satoria, the idea. What is truly scary about Kalas is that, as a woman, we all know him. Every single one of us has looked into the eyes of a self-proclaimed nice guy. The incel. The one who is kind and helpful until he isn't. Until all that niceness needs to be paid back. Then comes the violence. Verbal and physical. You are a whore because you won't sleep with him. What Kalas envisions with Satoria was a pretty trad wife, who sits demurely in his shadow, never speaking up or complaining, content to receive pretty gifts, a shallow relationship that did nothing but prop up his fragile masculinity. If you're watching this series, you've met Poppy. Trad wife material she ain't. Poppy and Syrah are messy, complicated, human. Incels don't like women with opinions or a personality of any kind. And any woman who acts out of line by being an actual person and not a doll, birthed from the void at the moment a man lays his eyes upon her, whose only joy is to keep him happy in all things, well, that woman deserves whatever happens to her. So at some point, the favorites could no longer stand it. The fear, the isolation, the guilt, the endless prattle about how tragic his life is and how it's all Ethos's fault. They break character, and Collis could no longer pretend they were his idea of Satoria. I'm a firm believer in the Satoria jumped theory, that Collis had been stalking her for a while, and she chose death over death. But I can't say I would be surprised if it turned out he threw her over the cliff when she refused his affection. Eos goes on. I told you because I knew no other way to tell you what I know to be true, just in case you decide to follow this destiny you believe it to be yours. It doesn't matter what soul you carry inside you. Eos lifted our joined hands. What does is whether or not Collis is capable of loving again, even his Gracia. And he's not. There is nothing but rot and decay where his cardia should be. Collis has no weakness. Eos is right, but for the wrong reasons. For all the key jangling about love being a weakness, there's been no actual evidence for it. But Collis is the true primal of death, and until those embers are removed, something that can't be done without another true primal of death to keep the world in balance, he's untouchable. I'm not sure how long it will take Niktos to go from death to true death, but any amount of time is too long. They arrive in Dallas and approach the rise, which is made of polished marble and diamonds, and see guards whose swords have golden blades. In Poppy's time, one of the few races that did not disappear when the gods went to sleep were the Guardians, an all-female race that carry golden swords. Their sworn duty is to defend Atlantia, and it's noteworthy they do not travel to war with Poppy. Clearly, they were left intentionally by Syrah and Ash to protect Atlantia. Though with Collis' love of gold, it's possible the curtains are just blue. Dalos is a very beautiful place, and is remarkably lifeless for being the seat of the primal of life. In fact, the only people who live there are Collis and his court, and they reside in Cor Palace. Cor is Latin for heart. And then they entered the courtyard. I jerked to a stop as horror gripped me. It hadn't been the wind I heard. Good gods, it had been moans. The sound came from the trees inside the courtyard, from the gleaming coves of the fortress, and from the billowing white cloth that weren't canopies but veils, torn gowns, and tunics rippling in the wind. Nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for this. My gaze darted from the nude body strung above the golden door of the core, stained with dark rivulets of crimson, to the swaying, limp forms beyond the white blossoms of the willows. Bile choked me. My heart pounded in my throat, threatening to seize at the sound, the moaning, echoing from the branches and from the spaces between the pillars lining the colonnade, where hands and feet had been spiked with stone. I do love when a story doesn't hold back the horror. Collis is a straight-up psychopath, and showing is always better than telling. Syrah starts to have a panic attack as the embers demand she heal, but Niktos stops it with a kiss. And we're gonna leave them to it because this is about foreshadowing and not what they are doing with those shadows. They are interrupted by Atez and another man. Syrah isn't yet sure Atez is, in fact, friend-shaped. And we get another threat to eyes when Atez says he was enjoying the show. The other, well, he's a revenant. And Niktas's spontaneous open-heart surgery is just an inconvenience. While the Rev is temporarily out of order, Atez leads them to the atrium, past the dead chosen, and an orgy. There's an un petit mort joke here somewhere. But I do like the symbolism. Dallas is the seat of life, but it's currently ruled by death. A city that should be home to thousands is empty. The chosen, meant to be the future of the gods, hang dead and dying in the courtyard. While inside, people lose themselves to the creation of new life. Callas could take his brother's embers, but he could not change his own nature. He is very much Niktas's dark mirror. Niktas should have been life, but became death. He values life, even as he recognizes it is finite and isn't unnecessarily cruel when it ends. Though he can be. Callas, by contrast, revels in his cruelty. Life, current and future, holds no value for him. But he never wants anyone to forget he is now life, the king, who everyone loves and adores. Thus all the gold. The embers throbbed faintly as the golden curtains parted, and my heart kicked around in my chest. The space beyond was a large circular chamber, but not what I would necessarily call an atrium. Deep couches and settees sat at the foot of thick swaths of material, which covered windows lining the walls, and the ceiling above looked like it had been painted over by gold. My gaze immediately went across the chamber to the raised, colonnaded dais between two closed archways. Gold curtains were tied back to the columns, revealing a throne, trimmed with what appeared to be diamonds and gold. I was beginning to see a theme, a rather gaudy one. In the core palace as we crossed the marble floor with the gold veining throughout. Insecure men must constantly reassure themselves of their value in desperate hope of convincing others. But gold isn't just Callas being gaudy and flaunting his wealth. Primals can create money, so it is literally no object to them. Callas loves gold because it is the color of life. So he drapes himself in it, decorates his palace in it, makes his servants paint gold hawk wings on their faces. So no one forgets he, not Ethos, is the primal of life and king of the gods. The gold veining in the marble creates a wolf symbol identical to the one in the Shadowlands Palace. It is the family crest. My family has always been partial to wolves, Niktas explained after a moment. My father once told me that there was no creature as loyal or protective as a wolf, or spiritual. He saw them as he saw himself, as a guardian. And we get a bit about the wing masks. They're another symbol that once belonged to my father, Niktas said after a moment, the fingers at my hips beginning to move idly. Hawks represent intelligence, strength, and courage. A reminder to be careful, but also brave. My father was always fascinated with the creatures. He thought they were... But we don't get to finish that thought because it's time to get this shit show on the road. Hayden arrives, making an ass of himself so we won't miss him when he's gone. Callas finally makes an appearance. Stale lilac count. And he exudes small dick energy by spilling his gold-laced ether everywhere. He's just kicking around in pants and his crown and nothing else for this formal meeting. His skin is sparkling and swirling with gold, and he uses an unnecessary compulsion just to have Sierra look him in the eyes after shadow stepping into her space. It was so easy to view him as a whiny putz on the first reading. But a putz on a power trip. To pay for the disrespect of, let me check my notes, Niktos not asking Colos's permission to take a consort, a young dragon from Kin's court has to be killed. The logic being to make sure none of the courts ally against him, so he constantly causes trouble between them. Also, Colos knows the parts of the prophecy Sierra and Ash don't. Yet. He's making sure she fulfills her part. But pin that. And if Sierra refuses, Colos will kill the draken himself, then Seraphina, then summon a draken from the Shadowlands to also be killed. Of course, there's no way he gets to step 2 of that plan without Niktos getting all sorts of disrespectful. Satoria also makes her first appearance as a presence within but separate from Seraphina, swearing vengeance against Colos. Poppy is going to be super fun when she gets those memories back. Ash takes Sierra to Vathi, Atez and Kin's court, as she insisted, where she returns the Draken to life, completing another part of the prophecy. The Draken is Thad, and he will be with Poppy in the War of Two Queens. Incidentally, in Two Queens, Reaver is described as being much larger than Thad, even though Thad is clearly older. I'm betting Reaver took the spot of bonded Draken for the Primal of Life and got a size boost. Speaking of which, we also get another mention of the Demise, and how their creation is forbidden due to how it changes the mortal in unpleasant ways. Maybe Isabeth wasn't so bad when Malik met her, and we only saw the end results? And Vessus, the hot mess in heels, is back. She's heard the joyous news that Sierra will be consort and has come to slit her throat before she can get the extra protection the position provides. This goes poorly. Whatever air had been in my lungs left as Niktos stalked forward, his eyes locked on mine. I tried to regain that breath, but the temperature of the air continued to drop. Becoming so frigid, my lips started to tingle. I couldn't take my eyes off him. His skin had thinned to the point he was more shadow and moonlight than flesh. The power radiating off of him drenched the air. Wisps of ether had gathered around him, swirling around his legs and licking over his shoulders. Through them I saw the faint outline of wings. Niktos was a storm of whirling fury. Shadows laced with thin strips of silver lashed out from him and blossomed beneath his skin. He'd never looked colder, harsher, or more like a primal of death than in that moment. A bolt of ether exploded from his palm and arced across the chamber like lightning. I flinched against the blinding light, gathering Reaver closer to me on instinct. Bessus wasn't faster this time. The blast of energy hit her chest, throwing her back. I gasped as her entire body lit up. For a moment she was suspended in the air, her veins glowing as light flooded her mouth, nostrils, and eyes. Then she flew backwards more, slamming into the wall. I didn't think I'd ever been more thrilled to hear the fleshy sound of a body smacking into an unyielding surface. Also, she kicked baby Reaver, nearly killing him, so I have no pity. And we got a baby count, which is absolutely my excuse for including this as foreshadowing, and not only because Primal Niktos is hot. No one can prove otherwise. There's just a touch of prophecy during the coronation, and we get a white pedestal count, though this one is holding her crown. Rise! Ash's voice was deeper, louder, a powerful thunder. Rise for the one who is born of blood and ash, the light and the fire, and the brightest moon. That's just a rephrasing of the prophecy line. A silver beast with blood seeping from its jaws of fire, bathed in the flames of the brightest moon to ever be birthed. You know, I remembered the brightest moon part of the prophecy, but it does pick up all the titles now that I look at it again. Worth noting here is that the line is not part of the prophecy, as Sira and Ash know it. But again, 10. Time to meet Delphi. Delphi turned to us. You've come seeking knowledge of how to repeat what never should have happened. That would be it, Ash said, crossing his arms. We want to know how the embers were transferred. You want to know more than that, Delphi corrected. The Ari, even with all they see, worried about what they couldn't predict. The unseen, the unknown, the possibilities. And nothing worried them more than the imbalance of primal power. The Fates wanted something in case there ever came a time when a new primal must rise, but there was no primal of life to ascend them. Delphi's dark head bowed as he walked among the shelves. Obviously, one of them foresaw some of what was to come, but none of them had enough foresight to see what they created could be used to bring about what they sought to prevent: a false king. First, star reference. I think this is one of those tidbits that you can slip right past if you aren't looking for it. That the Fates make predictions, but they don't have real foresight. Unlike the various primals of life, the Fates see the future like one of those memory card games. They know what they're looking for, and as events unfold, they can eliminate possibilities. But unturned cards are still only probability. Maybe it was when the primals warred with the ancients, forcing them to ground. Maybe it was events even further in the past. But at some point, one of the Fates looked at the cards on the table and guessed what might one day happen. So they made the star, capable of holding primal embers and souls. Probably seemed like a good idea at the time, but the law of unforeseen consequences never misses a chance to make someone their bitch. The real questions are, how did Collis find out about it, who gave it to him, and for what purpose? I don't have any guesses here. The exact timeline of when Collis took his brother's embers and when the prophecy came down is a bit muddy. We've only seen two Fates that we know of, Holland and Aiden, who we will get to later. Aiden could have done it if you take what he says at face value, which you should never do with a Fate. But also, we don't know how many Fates there are or where their loyalties lie. Delphi goes on to say the Fates erupted half a mountain to dig out the star from the undying hills. But we know from later in the story, this isn't true. The ancients fell as stars, and their power brought life to the land. They later rose to walk the earth, but some went back to sleep. Now what this ancient story is unknown. There's a scene that implies self-unaliving by dragonfire, but it could be metaphorical, and the Fates could have offed a sleeping ancient. But we probably won't know for sure until Holland feels chatty. Delphi isn't lying, he just doesn't have the information. Put a pin in that for a minute. We get an explanation of how the star works, and that Collis still has it, before Delphi tells them that Niktos can just drain Sira dry to obtain the embers. Sira, of course, would not survive a full-volume blood donation. Ash, of course, reacts poorly to this news, but Sira convinces him to back down. You were supposed to kill me. Delphi leaned back against the bookshelves. Patches of skin along his arms and neck charred. My stomach churned. That was how I died. Well, You're not dead, thanks to her. Ash's jaw worked as he glared at the god as if he were about to change his mind. Congratulations. Delphi's fingers stilled around his throat. It may be cause for celebration. His hand dropped to his lap. Perhaps there is a silver beast and a brightest moon. 2, not 1, he rambled. 2, then 1. You'll notice upon reread that no one gets the prophecy right. The most obvious is when Poppy and company assume Millie is the first daughter, because they don't have context for any other option. But here Delphi was also wrong. Not about Ash killing him, that was probably a reasonable possibility. But he used a singular interpretation of become one, and considered no other option. I guess he thinks love is required to make Shakespeare's proverbial beast with 2 backs? Though I wonder if he knows the whole prophecy, because if Ash became primal of life, where would the second daughter come from? They return to the Shadowlands to find it under assault. I do love a good battle scene. Atez finds Syrah and promises the attack will stop if only she goes with him. Not much of a choice. Time to return to Collis. Callum, the golden fucker, is the first to greet her, and Syrah learns that her father loved her enough to make demands of Collis. She also figures out that Callum told how to kill a primal, but that is a rabbit trail to chase on another day. Collis has arrived. Syrah's been out for 2 days. He could have done this at any point, but he needed to gloat. The embers remained silent as Collis strode forward, but there was still a burning in my chest, terror and fury that were only partly mine. A sense of déjà vu swept through me. I hadn't been here before, caged and chained, but Satoria had, when Collis brought her back to life. Hi, Poppy! After a brief exchange, we get Collis's version of the prophecy. He notes, like Penelope did, that prophecies come in 3 parts. Collis recites it as it was given to Syrah and Niktos, missing the parts in the middle. It also says, the false one will be stripped of glory until 2 born of the same misdeed. The full version, as far as we know it at this point, reads, the false one will be stripped of glory as the great powers will stumble and fall, some all at once, and they will fall through fires into the void of nothing. Those left standing will tremble as they kneel, will weaken as they become small, as they become forgotten. For finally, the primal rises, the giver of blood and the bringer of bone, the primal of blood and ash. Before going on to the part about the 2 daughters, I wonder if I looked crazy with 4 books propped open so I could compare line by line. What's interesting here is how Collis interprets it. What do you think? Collis asked. I forced a half shrug. Nothing much, except that it's clear to me who the false one, the great conspirator, is. But yes, I do believe it refers to me. Now the 2 daughters, that has always confounded me. Still does a little. But I do believe it's Mycella. She was, after all, promised to the once king, my brother. He tapped his chin. The second daughter? You. You are promised to the future king. Or who would have been the future king once Ethos entered Arcadia, and Niktos ascended to take his place. Remember how I said everyone gets the prophecy wrong because they lacked context? This is another good example. Collis turns once promised king into the once king, which is literally the opposite, as well as turning future king into once future king. Though I'm not sure how he squares Mycella, who was Niktos' mother, having blood full of fire, especially while he looks at Sira, who he knows has the embers of life, the fire of the gods, literally in her blood. By the same note, Kallus can't be the great conspirator, since he wasn't born of flesh and fire the primals. But Callum was. He was Satoria's brother, in the bloodline of the first mortal, created by Ethos with the help of the Draken. He was also the first revenant Kallus ever raised, a harbinger of what was to come. And he does plan in secret, one might say, conspires, with Isabeth to raise Kallus from his sleep. Here Kallus gets back to the part about the brightest moon, but he puts it at the end instead of in the middle. Then he puts the part about great powers below even that. I think this highlights who Kallus really is. It sounds to me like you get what you deserve. And that is your death. Kallus's still eyes met mine, and several seconds ticked by as tiny bumps spread across my flesh. You would think that. Perhaps it is what originally foreshadowed. But I suppose the ancients never thought I'd try to change it, that I'd dare to do so. Apparently, it was acceptable, even foretold, that Ethos set things in motion. A sneer accompanied the mention of his brother. But me? He laughed coldly. No, they thought I would just stand by and do nothing. They should have foreseen that. But even in their dreams, they underestimate me. What I will do not only to stay alive, but also get what I want. And that is to be the one Seraphina. The beginning and the end. Life and death. His eyes began to glow. There will be no need for mortal kings. No need for any other primal. Not when a primal of life and death has risen. A new horror descended on me. You want to kill all the primals? Most of them, yeah. What? He snorted. You look surprised. Come on, you've met a few of them. He shook his head. You've seen firsthand how annoying most of them are. I mean, he ain't wrong on that last point. But stop clocks and all that. But Kallus is a narcissist. Not only must the prophecy be about him, he must also be the victim and the messiah, never the villain. And it was all started by Ethos. Okay, Ethos isn't blameless, but that isn't what Kallus is talking about. In his mind, Ethos not bringing Satoria back was the catalyst for everything. Kallus's part in sending her over the cliff, and events leading up to that moment, were not his fault. Actions he took in stealing his brother's embers and raising Satoria were also not his fault. Nothing is ever his fault. His actions and choices are always forced on him by someone else. The ancients foretold his death because they hate him. So it's only right for him to fight back and become what they fear, become the singular power in the world. I'm all for seizing your power and defying fate and charting your own destiny, but a bit of self-honesty and self-reflection can go a long way too. Kallus, king of the gods, true primal of death, false primal of life, then tells the still mortal Seraphina he is not the villain, while force-choking her, which is a bit on the nose. He begins to drain her of the embers, choosing to make it painful for no reason other than because he can. But she's saved by Satoria speaking through her. It wasn't just my voice screaming, it was hers. Satoria, all the lives she lived, and it was ours that moved my tongue. You're killing me, I slurred, eyes heavy. You're killing me again, after all these years. In Kallus's telling of the first deaths of Satoria, she saw him and ran off the cliff in fear. After she was raised, Ethos helped Satoria end her second life. But here, Satoria claims Collis is killing her again. Maybe he did throw her off the cliff. Atez arrives in time to back Syrah's claim of being Satoria reborn, but Callum says to ignore them and kill her. Callum, who told how to kill a primal, knowing it would get Seraphina killed. Who was the first through the door when she was attacked by guards. Who wasn't there for his sister. Who would never have to babysit her again and be the most powerful primal's favorite for eternity. Who knew who and what Poppy is, but was going to let Isabeth sacrifice her anyway. Can't imagine why he would want Satoria dead. But Collis is convinced Seraphina is Satoria, and the book ends with Syrah seeing a silver white wolf in the moonlight. Please join me on the next Upon Reread when we begin A Fire in the Flesh.